August 1977. A small home in Enfield, London. At first glance, nothing extraordinary, but behind these walls lurks a story that would terrify a nation. Peggy Hodgson tucked her 4 children into bed. A television buzzed faintly downstairs. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Nothing unusual until the silence was broken. Margaret and Janet whispered beneath their blankets when 3 sharp knocks came from the wall beside them. Not pipes, not wind, something deliberate. Moments later, their dresser slid forward as if pushed by invisible hands. Margaret screamed. The door slammed shut on its own. Peggy rushed in, thinking the girls were fighting, but when she tried to push the dresser back, it wouldn't budge, as if something was holding it in place. That night marked the birth of Britain's most documented haunting. No one in that house would sleep peacefully again. The house felt heavy the next day. Footsteps echoed where no one walked. The children's toys moved while their mother washed dishes. When neighbors came to help, they heard the knocking themselves. The sound moved from wall to wall as if following them. Convinced something was wrong, Peggy called the police. Constables arrived, ready to mock the claim, until they saw it happen. The incident made its way into official police notes. Chair moved without visible cause. It was the first recorded proof that something unseen was there. In the weeks that followed, the activity intensified. Drawers opened by themselves. A Bible was thrown across the room. Voices whispered names in the dark. Soon it became clear. The force wanted one person. Janet, the 11-year-old, became its focus. Her room grew cold while others stayed warm. Witnesses claimed to see her lifted from her bed, drawn toward the window by an unseen force. Her scream froze everyone below. The Society for Psychical Research sent Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair to document the events. Neither was prepared for what they'd find. Maurice set up microphones and motion sensors. When he asked the entity to knock once for yes, twice for no, it answered. Then came the voice, a deep, raspy tone that spoke through Janet, claiming to be a man named Bill Wilkins who had died in the house. Public records later confirmed Bill Wilkins had indeed died there, of a brain hemorrhage in his chair downstairs. The voice mocked them, laughed at their fear, and recited details no child could know. It called Peggy by name in the middle of the night. As news spread, skeptics came to debunk it, but their equipment failed, batteries drained, and photographs showed shapes they could not explain. Newspapers called it a circus. Reporters camped outside, snapping photos as the family hid behind curtains. The Hodgsons were mocked in public, their children bullied. But at night, when the laughter stopped, the knocking returned stronger than before. Sometimes Janet fell into trances, eyes open yet unseeing. When she woke, she had no memory of what she'd said. A press photographer caught what appeared to be Janet mid-air, hurling toward the door. Skeptics called it a jump. Believers saw levitation. Reporters saw marbles shoot across rooms and stop mid-air. A toy Lego hit one in the face. It was hot to the touch. As autumn fell, the energy turned malevolent. Crosses were inverted, water poured from ceilings, and the air reeked of rot. Something old and angry had awakened. As dawn broke over Enfield, the house looked eerily normal. Sunlight filtered through dusty curtains, illuminating the aftermath of a night no one could explain. Furniture that had danced on its own now sat perfectly still, as if mocking them. Janet's mother, Peggy Hodgson, thought it was over. But for the girls, the haunting had only begun. They spoke of whispers that followed them into their dreams, a man's voice, guttural and resentful. During breakfast, Peggy noticed the cutlery trembling on the table, as if the air itself was charged. The sound of scraping metal filled the kitchen before all utensils clattered violently to the floor. That afternoon, a reporter from the Daily Mirror arrived. Hoping for proof, he set up his camera, but what he captured would terrify even seasoned skeptics. Word spread like wildfire. The Hodgson home became a magnet for psychics, priests, and skeptics. Some came seeking answers, others fame. But none could ignore what they felt inside those walls, a suffocating heaviness that pressed on the chest. Paranormal investigators Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair from the Society for Psychical Research took charge. They installed recorders, cameras, and motion sensors throughout the house, but the entity seemed to know. It toyed with them. Each night, they logged hundreds of strange sounds, knocks dragging furniture, sudden cold drafts, but one sound chilled them most, a deep male voice coming from Janet herself. When asked who he was, the voice replied, "My name is Bill Wilkins. I died here in that chair before you lot came." Maurice, both fascinated and frightened, played the recording to the family. Peggy wept. The voice claimed details about the house that Janet couldn't possibly have known. Skeptics said it was ventriloquism, a trick of the throat. But doctors and linguists confirmed Janet's vocal cords couldn't physically produce such low frequencies for long. Soon, objects began to fly even in daylight. A Lego brick struck a police officer in the head, one she'd seen levitating moments before. Her official report would later describe it as an unexplainable incident. Night after night, Janet's fits worsened. Her voice changed. Her eyes rolled back as she thrashed in bed. She'd wake bruised, claiming she'd been thrown. The investigators stayed overnight. One evening, Maurice awoke to the sound of heavy breathing inches from his ear. When he turned, no one was there, but his tape recorder was spinning on its own. Guy Playfair began noticing patterns. The entity seemed drawn to emotional tension. Arguments, tears, fear all seemed to feed it. The more the family suffered, the stronger the phenomena became. When priests attempted blessings, the disturbances only intensified. Crosses fell from walls, and unseen hands slapped the youngest children. The voice of Bill grew angrier. "Leave my house," it bellowed one night. Investigators captured it, a growl so loud it shook the ceiling. At times, multiple voices spoke through Janet at once. Men, women, even a child. Linguists later described it as impossible polyphonic resonance. By late 1978, the case drew international attention. TV crews filmed, skeptics debated, and the Hodgsons became reluctant celebrities. But inside, fear ruled every night. The neighbors too witnessed strange things, furniture shaking through the walls, phantom knocks echoing at midnight. Some fled their homes entirely. The girls were taken to a local psychiatric hospital for testing. No signs of mental illness were found. Janet begged to go home, terrified that Bill would follow her there anyway. One doctor witnessed a chair move across the floor by itself. Another saw Janet slide backward up a wall, feet first. Their notes described events inconsistent with physical explanation. As months passed, Janet's possession episodes grew shorter but more intense. The voice would erupt suddenly, then vanish, leaving her exhausted and pale. Maurice became emotionally entangled, haunted by guilt that he couldn't protect her. His own daughter had died before the case, and he believed the poltergeist preyed on that grief. The investigators conducted one final seance. Janet sat in the center, surrounded by candles. When asked what he wanted, the voice replied, "All I want is rest." Then, silence. No crashes, no whispers. For the first time in over a year, the house slept, but even in silence, the darkness lingered, watching, waiting. Weeks passed in uneasy quiet. The family dared to hope the haunting was over, but the house had only fallen asleep, and it would soon wake again. Late one night, a soft thud broke the silence. Peggy opened her door and saw Janet standing motionless in the hallway, eyes glassy, whispering, "He's back." Moments later, furniture erupted across the room. A heavy dresser slid violently forward, missing Peggy by inches. The entity had returned, angrier than ever. Janet began sleepwalking, sometimes vanishing for hours. Investigators once found her wedged inside a cupboard, unconscious, her body contorted as if placed there. Every attempt to cleanse the house failed. Holy water boiled, candles extinguished mid-prayer. It was as though something inside refused to let go. Janet's voice returned, lower, guttural, now mocking the investigators. It recited their private thoughts, their griefs, their doubts. Maurice, exhausted, demanded proof. "If you are real," he shouted, "show yourself." The room fell deathly still, then every door in the house slammed in unison. The following night, investigators heard dragging sounds from the ceiling. When they entered Janet's room, her bed was shaking violently, lifting off the floor. Playfair shouted prayers over the noise. The air grew thick and warm, an oppressive energy pressing against them. Then, a deafening crack. When the light faded, Janet was still. The bed lowered gently. She opened her eyes, but they were not hers. For a full minute, she stared at Maurice, unblinking. Then, suddenly, silence. Janet collapsed unconscious. The recordings from that night remain some of the most disturbing in paranormal history, raw, guttural, human and inhuman all at once. After that night, the activity slowly declined. Weeks passed with no movement, no voices. Janet began sleeping through the night again. In the following months, the Hodgsons moved on, but Janet confessed to Playfair that she still heard Bill's voice, soft, distant, in the corners of her mind. By 1979, the case was closed. The Society for Psychical Research filed over 500 pages of evidence, audio, photos, and testimonies, none of which could conclusively explain what happened. Skeptics claimed it was a hoax, the work of imaginative children, but those who spent nights inside the house swore otherwise. The air, they said, felt alive as if watching. Years later, Janet still insisted it was real. In an interview, she whispered, "It stayed with me. It's quieter now, but sometimes I still feel him watching." Maurice Grosse never fully recovered from the case. He believed Enfield had chosen him for a reason to face his own grief through another's torment. When Maurice died in 2006, his family claimed strange things began happening in his home: clocks stopping, faint knocks, and once, a child's laugh echoing through the hall. To this day, skeptics argue, believers insist, and the truth remains trapped between both worlds. But one thing is certain: in that modest Enfield home, something unholy left its mark not just on the walls but on every soul who entered. 40 years later, the house still stands. A new family lives there quietly, privately, but neighbors say that sometimes late at night they still hear knocking, 3 times, always 3. The Enfield Poltergeist case remains one of the most documented hauntings in history, studied, debated, and feared. What happened in that house may never be fully understood, but perhaps that's exactly how the entity wanted it. Some hauntings never end, they only change form, and sometimes what begins as whispers in one house ends in screams across the world. But what if the terror wasn't from ghosts, but from the frozen unknown? 9 hikers, 1 mountain, no survivors. What they found defied science and sanity. Click now to uncover the mystery that froze a nation. This isn't the end, it's only the evidence.